Institutional and accredited investors often take different approaches than retail investors. In many cases, they are looking to make sizable investments in undervalued companies, and they typically have a low time preference. Today, we will be hearing from Jack Pitts, the technology portfolio manager and financial market researcher that went on to become the co-founder of SLictionary, the community-sourced Bitcoin-based dictionary. Jack will be telling us about the similarities the digital currency market has and doesn't have compared to equity markets, what needs to take place for BSV to become valuable, as well as why BSV has a competitive edge over other blockchain networks and industry giants. I'm your host, Patrick Thompson, and you're watching More Than Money. Today, I am here with Jack Pitts. Jack, how's it going, man?
Great. Thrilled to be here. New York's my home court advantage, so it's really great to see BSV in New York.
And a lot of people know you from SLictionary, but maybe what fewer people know is before you were doing the work with SLictionary, you were a financial market researcher and a portfolio manager. So can you tell us just a brief summary about the work you were doing in that space?
Yeah, so I started picking stocks when I was about 11. I had a math teacher who got us into it, like a little contest, and I thought it was really cool. My father was kind of into it at the time, so he helped me a little bit. And then when the stock market crash of '87 happened, I hit the library because I thought I had this notion in my head where I got out the Wall Street Journal, I looked up all the stock prices that day on Black Friday, and I wrote down every single ticker symbol that did not go down that day. And I thought, if you didn't go down on Black Friday, maybe that's a good stock. And so I hit the library for months and months and months. I ended up picking this awful mining stock called Wasabi Trust, and it was a mining company out of Africa, I think. And the problem was, at the very end, I didn't know what a PE ratio was, and I opened up these huge books you would get in the library called Moody's, and this is how you spend a lot of time. Even professionals use Moody's at the time in the 80s to research stocks because there just wasn't a lot of information. There was no internet, and so you couldn't look stuff up. You had to go to the library. And I saw this ranking of PE ratios, and it basically said, Wasabi Trust is number one, highest PE ratio, which, if you know anything about finance, is the worst thing you want, right? I mean, it can be a good indicator if the company's growing really quickly, but usually it means you don't have a lot of earnings. If your company doesn't have a lot of earnings and the price is very high, well, then that could be a problem. So I ended up picking the wrong stock because I thought PE ratio was a good thing. But I was 16, so I went in the Navy and tried out engineering for a while and didn't love it. And I always loved finance, and so I went and got a job on Wall Street. Had some nice connections, so very lucky for me. And I got a job at a hedge fund where I kind of almost worked for free for a couple years, and it was right during the dot-com bubble. And so I ended up shorting all these pieces of junk stocks, very similar to today in the crypto crap world, where there's just a lot of garbage out there that people don't really know what it does, but there's a lot of hype and there's excited, people on the internet talking about it. People are talking about it at barbecues, and it makes the price go up. And so that era was like really valuable to me to kind of figure out how the world works. And I've always been a fundamental analyst. I'm not a chartist. I don't try and figure out like where it's going to be Wednesday or next week. For me, my niche was, I'm looking for 10 to 20 year investments where you can get in really early in the game and you can see the vision from the founders and the product and how big it could be. So a perfect example is one of the biggest stocks for my company was Google. And we knew about it because there was a company called GoTo.com who did like search engine stuff. And they perfected the auction model for what we see today when you open up Google and half the page is ads at the top. GoTo.com invented that model where the advertisers bid to be higher, and Google perfected it. And it would take a little while to explain exactly how, but it's not super intense technology. It's something that's understandable for someone who doesn't even have a technical background. All you would have to understand is incentives. And so when Google came out, it was actually a problem because we were invested in this thing called GoTo, which turned into Overture, which turned into Yahoo Search, and then Microsoft acquired it and put it into Bing. So it's still around, the thing that we invested in, I think 2001 or 2, but then Google came around and everything I saw was better. They had improved the auction format for the ads, they had improved the actual search itself, and so this was a bad thing for us until it went public. And for whatever reason, Yahoo had a bad search quarter right before they went public. The founders, Sergey and Larry, kind of did an IPO that Wall Street hated. They tried to change the IPO system and squeeze the banks a little bit, and it turned out to be a very unpopular IPO. So I thought it was probably going to go around $300-400, and it went for $80, which is great for us because we bought a ton of it right at the IPO. And the funny thing is, we had a meeting with one of our bigger investors in the fund, and it's an Ivy League institution that everybody would know. I don't want to say who it is, but they were concerned because our fund was finance, banking, insurance focused mainly, but we had just had a ginormous profitable year based on Google stock going up. This was like early 2005. We were having this meeting, and they ended up firing us. Like, they took their money out because we didn't meet the mandate that they thought we should be doing. But if you look back on that, my fund owned Google for probably almost a decade after I left the fund. So we owned it for like 15 years. And if you look back on that and think, how the hell did you get fired for picking Google at the IPO in 2005? And to this day, I bet you that fund, that endowment fund for a university, probably owns more Google than any other stock in their portfolio right now. But in 2004, they fired us for it. And so it's that kind of mentality that people don't look back and see. They just see the winner and they go, oh, of course Google was awesome. How did you not know that? And I think we're in that state in BSV now where we're sitting here and everybody thinks that it's bad and it doesn't work and this guy's a fraud and all this stuff. It's the same story every single time. You have to look at the product. You have to look at the apps and the companies, and you have to evaluate, does this stuff work? Are the people good? Are they honest? Are they going to be in for the long term? And these parallels are so obvious to me, but I realize they're not obvious to others because some people don't have that experience. They've gone through once where the underdog ended up being the big dog.
And with that being said, when you apply your portfolio management and financial research to BSV, what makes Bitcoin SV attractive to you opposed to the several other blockchains and digital currencies that are on the market?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways that BSV is great, but for me, the easiest one is, I know a little bit about the Visa and MasterCard network, a little bit deeper than maybe some people do. And what it comes down to is Visa, MasterCard charge something like 10 to 30 cents per transaction. So if you go to the store and buy a pack of gum, right, that's bad for the store because they're going to pay, if you buy $1 worth of gum, 30% of that is going to go to Visa. And that doesn't even count the additional percentage that's going to go to Chase Manhattan Bank or USAA or whoever your credit card's through. So the store's kind of giving you that one, right? They're hoping that you load up your card instead of just getting a pack of gum. But there's so many applications where all you need is one thing. All you need is maybe a definition. You don't want ads. You don't want to be pestered. Can I just pay a penny, get what I need, and go away, and not come back for a month? And that's worse than a pack of gum, right? That's who is crazy enough to start a business where the business is thrilled if someone comes in once a month and gives you a penny. You can only do that on BSV, and you can only do that at big scale. And so for me, this microtransaction ability to be able to do small transactions that help you get rid of something like ads, which are a total pain in the butt, like, why would you not do that? Do you not value your time if you don't want to get rid of that? So that's just a really simple example. And I'm building a company based on that called SLictionary, which is really simple. It's just a dictionary without ads, but there's so much more that we can do with that. For instance, that would be enough. That would be enough to be a slightly better dictionary for the website versions of it, where you get kind of the full definition, multiple different definitions of the same word. But it's way better than that, because we're going to give the people who write the definitions the ability to make money. And they're only little tiny amounts for each person that comes into the dictionary, but if there's millions coming through, then if you're the owner of a word that's looked up a lot and you've done a really good job of defining it better than what Merriam-Webster has done, with maybe a picture, some audio, maybe you have an accent and you can say the word a little bit differently. There's just so many different things of variety that we can give you, but the important part is that the person who writes the definition is going to make the money. And so we can take a penny, we collect it from the guy who's looking up the word. Let's say it's a Gorilla DAO. It could even be, a product that you put in there. That penny, we take it and we split it. We keep 0.3 of a penny, and then you, the person who wrote the definition for Gorilla DAO, gets 0.7 of a penny, right? Every single time someone looks up Gorilla DAO, you get another 0.7 of a penny. I get 0.3 of a penny. So that is not possible on Visa. It's not possible on MasterCard. It's not possible on any of the other cryptocurrencies, because they don't scale and they don't do microtransactions.
I agree. I think one reason BSV is so attractive to me, at least, is never before have we had this micropayment economy where you can send somebody a penny and it's settled instantaneously, and the transaction fees associated with it aren't so large that somebody ends up losing in a major way where it makes the transaction not worth it. So I think that opens up a world of opportunities that we haven't experienced ever before, just because it wasn't possible to send either money or data from location A to location B for such a low price. I think that just creates so many opportunities in the world, and there's a lot of upside with that. But I know, you being a portfolio manager, that a big part of it is about managing risk, and no investment is riskless. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what would you say the risk associated with maybe being invested in BSV or the broader blockchain digital currency ecosystem would be? Because I think a lot of people are aware of the upside, or they hear the person at the barbecue saying that they did this and maybe they made some money overnight, but that doesn't come without risk. So what are the risks associated with being invested in that sort of emerging technology?
Yeah, you just asked the best question you could possibly ask. What someone will tell you with cryptocurrency, right, if it does even a little bit of work, will say, how big can this get? Like, how do you value a Bitcoin? How do you value an Ethereum coin? How do you arrive at a number where you say, hey, this is undervalued, let me buy this and hope it goes up, right? That's what you do with stocks. The company still exists, and there's ways where the stock price affects the company in many ways. But the point is, buy low, sell high. And you're actually helping the company by doing that. So how do you do that in cryptocurrency? It's not a company. There's no dividend yet. And so how do you value it? So what people have done, and this is every person that I've talked to on Wall Street or elsewhere who's even attempted to price this thing out, whether it be BTC or any other cryptocurrencies, they do this. They go, well, there's about $20 trillion of kind of currency floating around. The US has 10, Europe has 10, maybe Asia has 10, so maybe it's even 30 or 40, but it's somewhere in the tens of trillions of dollars. And you take that number and you divide by, if you the winning coin, whatever coin you think is going to win this big game, and you divide by, say, 21 million, and you get a number. And that number is pretty big. This is where people get these, it's going to be 100,000, it's going to be 1 million per coin. That's how you get to that number. And it's really easy to do that. I don't totally disagree with it. If you think that this thing called a cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is going to become money, and it's going to become universal like gold and silver might have been in the Roman days, then sure, you could do that math. But what's the downside risk now? And that's the question that you asked, I think, is the most important question. To understand the downside risk, you have to know the fundamentals of the actual technology itself. So what is Bitcoin? It's a commodity. It is literally taking, Malcolm McLean in 1956 took the shipping industry and said it's really inefficient. His trucks were sitting in New Jersey, and he had to wait for the stevedores to fill up the 20 trucks in front of him. And he's like, this is crazy. There should just be a crane that picks up a box that's a uniform size box and puts it on the back of my truck, and I'm gone in 3 minutes, instead of all this clitter clatter because the bananas are in one box, and then the iPhones are in another, and you've got diamonds and they have to have special, just put it all into this big box, right? And so he created this protocol, which is literally the dimensions of the box. Maybe it has some hooks in it so it can be lifted easily by cranes. It's a protocol. It's just a set of rules, like the game of basketball has that set of rules. And so he did this, and he eliminated, I think, 95% of the waste and the stevedores and all these, just completely revolutionized shipping, so that when Amazon's trying to ship to you in a day now in 2021, it's mainly possible because of all these containers, and that can go from the train to the truck, and you can even live in one if you want. But a Bitcoin is exactly the same. It is the container that holds computation or information or data. And if you think about it today, it's just like 1956 in the container world, a pre-container world. We have Amazon Web Services, and they have a language, right? Then we have Google Cloud, and then we have Apple iCloud, and they're humongous businesses, right? Data, again, is the new oil. But the oil's got to go into a barrel, because that's what everybody can deal with. So when you try and have these silos, it makes all the interactions difficult. Netflix is a perfect example of this. They were on, I think, Amazon Web Services, and they needed to double source it, so then they had to go to Google. Well, you got to hire more engineers, right? But what if you could just move the data from one to the other, or have them on all of them, and not have extra engineers? And so that's what Bitcoin allows. So how does that tell you what the risk is? The way Bitcoin works is it is a computational commodity where there's two pieces. The one piece is like land with a building on it, right? It has a function. You have a definition. You own it. It's Gorilla DAO. When someone comes in, you get paid. And at the end of the year, I'm going to give you a statement, and it's going to say, Patrick, you made $10 on Gorilla DAO this year. And the year before, you made $5. 100% growth. It's like a little micro company, right? But it's sitting on a STAS token, and a STAS token is BSV. It is Bitcoin. So your definition, like a piece of art that has a cash flow, not because someone valued it and said, I like the way you painted this, or I like your style. It's literally, I like your definition because I learned from it. It's a piece of information, and the world's willing to pay you $10 a year for that piece of information. I can value that. And if it's sitting on, let's say, 1 Satoshi, right, and you have a bunch of money in your wallet, and you go to buy your pack of gum, and you look in your wallet, and you have the Gorilla DAO token, it's sitting on 1 Satoshi, and then you have a bunch of other Satoshis that are empty. Well, when you go to buy your gum, you can use the empty coins, because the one that has your definition on it, if you were to spend it or redeem it, your definition goes away. It's like setting a nuclear bomb to your business, right? It's gone. Patrick's definition disappeared. Now the next guy who defined it and was number 2, now he's number 1 now. Now he's making all your $10 per year. He's eating up your business. And so how do you value that coin, though? It's really easy. 1 Satoshi. if you're getting paid, say, $10 a year, and I put a PE multiple on it of 5, 10, or 100, depending on what the growth rate is, let's say it's 10, well, your token's worth $100, and it's on one Satoshi. So multiply, there's 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis in Bitcoin. If every Bitcoin was worth $100, what's $100 times 2.1 quadrillion? It's a stinking ridiculously big number. Now that's not the price of Bitcoin, because that's the half of Bitcoin. It's not a half, but that's the section of Bitcoin that has businesses built on the coins itself. The other is the empty containers, and that's what's used as money. So the more that data grows and has values like $100 for a Satoshi, it takes up space, right? So everybody's trying to hodl Bitcoin. Oh, I'm just going to stick it in my pocket and not use it and hope that it goes up. How about you hodl a little micro business? You hodl a definition. And when you hodl that, yeah, the Satoshi can rise in price. And maybe that definition that you wrote is bad and it doesn't earn any money. Well, if one Satoshi someday becomes 10 cents or $1 someday when BSV or Bitcoin goes way up, then you might redeem it. And because if it's not making you any money, it's like a bad building, right? It's the building that you wreck to put up another building. So on the train seat example, if all the seats are occupied on the train, and the train is literally the coins of Bitcoin, well, you got to pay the old lady to get off, right? And she bought her $10 ticket. You got to offer a $100 bill. Like, hey, lady, why don't you wait for the next train? Here's $100. So what's an empty seat worth? It's not worth $10 anymore. It's worth $100, right? It's worth whatever people are willing to pay to access those coins to put data into the container. And so when you value it that way, for instance, SLictionary, I could put 1 million words into SLictionary, and if we had 20 definitions per word, I could take up all of Bitcoin. With, it'd be like putting a farm down in Manhattan, right? It doesn't sound ideal, but in 1700 there was farms in Manhattan. But the way that farmer makes money is he starts breaking it down. He's like, well, I don't need the whole farm. Why don't we put a butcher shop, a baker shop, and a candlestick maker on these little sections? And as he keeps selling pieces off, basically the price of land in Manhattan's going up. And that's Bitcoin. And if you can evaluate, hey, EHR data is going to put a bunch of information on coin, SLictionary is going to put a bunch of information on coin, and these people are going to start information hodling, right? They're taking up space. So now there's just a little bit left for you and me to use money. So now we got to bid it up, and so the price goes up. So to me, the fundamental value of Bitcoin today is actually super low because we don't yet have all this information on coin. But these things are coming, and they're coming very fast. And so in finance and in Wall Street, you're never worried about what happened in the past. You're worried about what's going on in the future, right? Because things grow. And that is how you kind of calculate the price for BSV. And, I think it's at a good price now. I just think we're in this space where it's worth $3 billion or whatever. It's just like Google in 2004, right? Yeah, it had a much smaller valuation. If you were smart, you would have paid more for it back then, right? And it's the same thing here.
That is a really good way to put it. I like how you say on coin. Some people say on chain, but it really is what's being stored, like you said, per Satoshi. And that's a really good way to frame it when thinking of where things could go in the future. Now, something I'm wondering is, when it came to portfolio management and financial research, how much law and regulation may affect how a portfolio manager constructs their portfolio? Because what we're experiencing now in the blockchain digital currency space is government agencies like the Securities Exchange Commission, Commodities Future Trading Commission, taking a closer look at blockchain and digital currency space, especially companies that offer lending and borrowing services on the blockchain. And I wonder, first, I think it's a good thing because the space has become legitimate to a point where these agencies are paying attention in a way that they weren't in the past. So I think that validates what a lot of people are trying to do. But from someone maybe looking to make investments, or you're managing a portfolio and you're managing your risk there, how do those decisions and legal actions maybe affect how the portfolio manager will construct the portfolio?
Do you mean in terms of, do I worry about Bitcoin getting so regulated or maybe even outlawed? Is that what you mean, or do you mean more from
No, that's a good way to put it. Maybe how will the regulation being created affect the sort of financial market that's been built around blockchain technologies and digital currencies at this point? Will that make maybe new companies and startups a bit more hesitant to move fast and break things, as people say? And when it comes to the trading that people do you think that would make, if a portfolio manager dealt with digital assets, would that make them hit the brakes a bit and maybe rework the strategy to the point where the university took the endowment, their endowment money away?
Yeah.
Is that a risk that people face that portfolio managers and financial market researchers have to think about and deal with in their work?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point because there's a couple aspects to law and regulation. One of which would be just, what is this thing? What are these cryptocurrency things? Are they securities? Are they commodity? And those things are regulated differently. So for instance, we had all these ICOs in 2017, and they didn't really get sold to Wall Street firms. They got sold to everyone. Now that might sound great, but currently that's illegal. It's, my personal opinion is I like crowdfunding. I think it's one of the greatest things that you shouldn't just, and a full-on adult can go into a casino and bet on red on a roulette wheel for any amount that he wants, but he can't invest in his buddy's garage, wine business or beer business, or it's a little odd. That's a personal opinion. But when it comes to regulation, I think that regulation will actually encourage a better, more professional investor to come in and not only invest in maybe the currency itself if it's undervalued, but also the businesses that are building on top of the technology. And so I think the coming regulation will probably be good. And when it comes to say, would you outlaw maybe a blockchain, or it depends. If the blockchain is anonymous, I mean, Satoshi's main input to this whole thing was, if it's anonymous, governments are going to end it. So it's really simple. I'll give you an example. It's so simple. As soon as you have anonymous money, you can have an assassination market. Now, who do you think is the number one target for an assassination market?
I'd have to say the president.
Yeah, well, politicians, right? It could be your local politician.
Same ballpark.
Yeah, same ballpark. But let's say I'll invent a country nearby, Canada. I don't even know who the premier is. I know nothing about Canada. But let's say there's 10 million Canadians that don't like him. If they put up $1, which is far cheaper than a campaign donation, they put up $1 into an assassination market. Now he's got a $10 million hit on his head. That would work. It would totally work. Somebody would do it, right? Somebody would even probably risk jail time to knock off. It's never going to fly. I'm sorry. I don't care whether you're an ANCAP or what your religion is or your philosophy. It doesn't matter. It's just not going to happen. As long as there are rulers in the world, they are not going to allow assassination markets. And the only way to have an assassination market is anonymous. And so all the anonymous coins are going to be gone. And I think we've already seen that. Monero and Dash and all these dark coins have been kind of shoved off of the regulation compliant exchanges. But there's more coming. So things like Lightning Network, to the extent that can hide and you can churn your money into a Lightning node, it's going to be shut down. I'll make that prediction right now. I don't know the ins and outs of Ethereum because it doesn't really work, so I don't really worry about it. But to the extent that they're moving into anonymity, that's going to be basically shut down. So those things are very simple. And BSV is the opposite, right? The whole idea of the Bitcoin blockchain was it's public. There's traceability only if you get a warrant, right? So all your transactions are totally private unless you're killing people, you're raping, you're doing, rape, romp, and pillage, you're doing something like that, then look out, because eventually, like Ross Ulbricht got caught, they're going to find you, and they're going to find you through Bitcoin.
Right.
But they need the warrant, right? And that's where the law comes in. And I think you take a Wall Street crowd, and these people have money, and they have a lot of big businesses and power, and they don't want to see assassination markets, and they don't want to see, some of them take it too far, and they don't want to even see crowdfunding. Now, I think that's taking it too far, so there's going to be a battle regulation-wise. But overall, to answer your question, I think the regulation that's coming will actually improve the system. And every government's going to choose something different. And so, like anything else, the nations will compete. And maybe one nation shuts down BSV, says, we don't like you guys. Any citizen that uses it in Venezuela is going to be hung. I have no idea.
No,
but the good nations, I think, will adopt it.
I agree with that. I think that regulation law shouldn't be seen as a negative thing. I do think different areas of the world will handle it in ways that they think best, and it might not be uniform right away. But ultimately, I think that validates the industry. I think years ago, it could have been precarious. Are we going to be here today? What's it going to look like in the future? Right. Will big players on Wall Street even take an interest in it? And I think now it's at the point, like, it is here to stay in some capacity or the other. How will people innovate this thing? What will people put on coin to add more value to it, to bring it into more industries and provide solutions? And now, just as a final sort of question to wrap this up, if there was one general takeaway that you would want portfolio managers and financial market researchers to know about BSV and the broader blockchain and digital currency ecosystem that they probably don't already know, what would that general takeaway be?
Oh God, there would be a lot of them, first of all. But the general takeaway for me is that I saw some really great businesses in 2001. The first one I saw was Expedia. And when you dug into it, there was a great business model there that helped hotels out, especially. Rich Barton ran that company and just did an amazing job of creating a product that no one would have dreamed of prior to the internet. And same thing with Amazon. I could argue that shipping everything is probably not a great idea, but small things like book CDs, it just made sense to have one center where you held all the books instead of 10,000 stores all over the nation. And the thing is, those guys got capital. And I think what people aren't seeing, because of all the, you can get rich quick by buying Solana and it goes up 10 times and you make all this money, you didn't really do anything, right? You're literally in a casino, and totally randomly or based on nonsense, and nobody knows. It's like, oh, this guy's an expert, and so he likes Solana, so that must be a good thing. But they're not actually researching the technology and figuring out, does it work, why does it work, and picking the right thing. And I think BSV's problem is that there's all these experts that are choosing other things, and they got it wrong in the dot-com year, right? There was 5,000 companies, and like 2 of them survived and became valuable to us today. We still use Expedia and Priceline, and we still use Amazon, and all the other stuff went away. But they all got capital. So we had this amazing dot-com bubble, so to speak, where the capital went to these companies, and out of it emerged these amazing companies. And I think BSV needs capital. It's starving for capital, and I think if you're early, like today, and you get money into these startups, these garage band startups of 1 and 2 people, or organizations that are larger like EHR that are taking advantage of the technology, if you get money into these things now, I think you'll be rewarded. And so that's kind of where my head is at. It's like, okay, BSV's cool. I think the currency is undervalued in a way. I can also tell you how it can go down. So it's not the world's greatest investment. It's probably pretty good though. But I see these startups, and they need money, and they have these great visions, and they have done the work. They actually understand the technology. They understand what Bitcoin can do. But to build, you got to have time, you got to have computers, and you got to have effort put in. And I think what I would like to tell Wall Street is, hey, wake up and start figuring out how this stuff works, because just like you can get fired for picking Google in 2004, which is one of the greatest, stocks you could have ever owned for the last 20 years, the same thing now. Like, you have this opportunity to pick the right thing out of a crowd and add your capital to make it happen yourself. So forget about just being a guy who buys low and sells high. Be the guy who directs capital into the people that are doing the right thing and the products that are the right products. And that's where I think we're sorely lacking. So we need Wall Streeters and financiers to start studying and figure this stuff out, and then finding the good people to push the capital to.
I think that's a great parting message right there. And what was said on stage is, somebody said, hope isn't a strategy. So people who are maybe rolling the dice or putting their money on red when it comes to different digital assets in the space, if they're sitting back and doing nothing, the hope isn't, you can't just hope and pray that things work out. It's people who make a difference and who can make the change in the world. So I think that's a really good message of, you have the ability to maybe inject this capital in these garage band startups that are really doing the work to change the world, and it'd be good to see that happen from here on out.
And by the way, we don't just need Wall Streeters. When we come at you in October with the last third of our SLictionary product, I call it loosely micro investing, and we're going to allow you to actually purchase definitions that can be created by other people. So you can come in as a financier, and for $2, $3, $4, maybe even $100, you can incentivize these pieces of art known as definitions to be created, and then you will own them. So it's like we're creating Monopoly, the game, for people who have $3 to invest in Bitcoin. And the beautiful thing is, you're financing a worker bee in our SLictionary army to do his craft. You're creating a little mini job. And I think you don't need to have $1 million, a Wall Streeter. You can just be, an 18-year-old that has figured this stuff out and make these investments. And SLictionary won't be the only one. I think in the future we'll see more, but I look forward to telling you more in October.
I look forward to hearing more in October. Jack, thank you so much for your time today.
It's been great. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed all of the insight that Jack shared with us in this episode. I'd like to take a second to look at the key takeaways from our conversation. Number 1, putting data on chain, or as Pitt says, on coin, is what makes Bitcoin valuable. Filling blocks with valuable information, which is really just called data, gives Bitcoin the ability to increase in price and makes it more valuable. Number 2, the law enforcement and regulation that we are seeing in the blockchain and digital currency industry is beneficial. Regulation can improve systems. And finally, number 3, BSV's transactions fees, which are a fraction of a penny, are one of its best features. They give Bitcoin a competitive edge over Visa and MasterCard, whose transaction fees are multiples higher. I'd like to thank everyone who tuned into this episode of More Than Money. My name is Patrick Thompson, and I hope to see you back for the next episode.
Time to redefine industries. Time for the BSV blockchain. It's about time, New York City.